Assalamu alaikum, dear students. I hope you all are doing well and enjoying your summer vacations. But study is important as well. So I am here to teach you chapter number 4 of your science book. The heading of the chapter is the living things and environment. First of all, you have to learn about living things. Dear students, you have to observe in your environment there are a lot of living things around you. For example, a plant that is growing day by day is a living thing. An animal could be a cat or dog or a rabbit or a horse around you. All these animals are falls in the category of the living things. Plus, human beings, your friends, your father, your mom, your relatives, your neighbors, all are the living falls in the category of the living things. So basically, these are few examples from your environment. Now we will learn a definition of the simplest living thing. Um, the simplest living thing or microscopically small living things are called protists. Most protists are single-celled organisms. It means that the simplest organism and microscopically small means that a living organism that we cannot see with our naked eye is known as a microscopically small living thing, and it is called protist, and it is a single cell. Now there is a pie chart. Pie chart means a circular chart that divides the categories according to their numbers or according to their percentage. So I hope you are clear about the pie chart. Now we will divide the species that are identified so far by the scientists according to their numbers into this pie chart. So first of all, the largest part of the pie chart is carried. The largest part of the pie chart is carried out by the animals. So we can say that the 2 million, around 2 million species of animals plus, and the second number there are the part of the circle that is carried out by the plants, and there are the bacteria, and there are the fungi, and there is a smallest part, a thin part for the all other species. So if we talk about the number of the species, there are 2 million species of animals, 400 species of the plants, 100 species of the fungi, and many thousands species of bacteria are identified by the scientists so far. Now, environment. Simply, simply all the things around us, all the things around us makes up environment. Now, there is a definition. Everything around a living thing, large or small, that affects its way of life is known as environment. Okay. If we observe in your surrounding, there are a lot of things in your surrounding. They include living things as well as they include non-living things. For example, there I like to share some examples of the living things around you. Like maybe there are the pets, there are the animals, there are plants around you, or there are people around you, and there are some non-living things around you, like furniture. Furniture is a part of the category of the non-living thing. There will be some no, oh, there were. Where is my cursor? One second. There are a lot of non-living things around you, like furniture, like a table, like a chair, like a freezer, like the bed, like today is very hot, so I can say AC. So there are a lot of things around you that are some of them are living things, and some of them are non-living things. So depending upon the living things and the non-living things, we will divide our environment into two main sections. First section is the biotic environment. First type of the environment is the biotic environment. in this section or in this type of the environment, the things that we discussed in the category of the living things, all those things fall into this category. The living part of the environment, including plants, animals, fungi, bacteria, and other microscopically small organisms, is the biotic part or the living part of the environment. Clear? Now, if we exclude all the living things from our surrounding, we will left with all the non-living things. So all the non-living things falls in the category of the abiotic environment. The other part of the park is the non-living environment of these living things, is often known as abiotic environment, or it is also called as physical environment. So there are two types, mainly two types of the environment: abiotic environment and biotic environment. Biotic environment contains all the living things surrounds you, and abiotic environment is all the non-living things around you. Here is the definition of the community. All the plants and animals living in one place, such as a park, make up a community, just like the human beings live in the societies. Now, ecosystem, community of plants and animals along with their physical or non-living environment make up an ecosystem. In the community, there were only living part of the environment, there were only living things, but in the ecosystem, living part of the environment as well as non-living part of the environment is there. Here is a picture showing the ecosystem. If we observe this picture keenly, there are living things, a lot of living things, for example, fish, for example, plants, for example, trees, for example, or sun. All these points are the living part of this park or living part of this ecosystem. And now if we talk about the non-living part of this ecosystem, so we can talk about stones, we can talk about rocks, we can talk about soil, we can talk about water, we can talk about this fish hook, that is carried out by the buoy. So all these things are the non-living or the physical part of this ecosystem. Living parts are the fish, living parts are the plants and the trees, the plants in the water and the trees outside the water, or there are a lot of other living things that lives in the water. So this is basically an ecosystem that includes both type of the environment, biotic and a non abiotic, biotic and abiotic. Now, habitats. Habitat is just like address or home of an animal. A habitat is a place that provides plant or animal with somewhere to live and with everything else it needs to survive. And also, a habitat provides an animal with his or food. So animal loves to live in the places where he can find the place where he want to live, and where he can find something to eat that he loves to eat. For example, here is a picture of a giant panda. A giant panda's habitat is limited to where it can find its favorite food. So its favorite food is bamboo shoots. So that is why the habitat of the giant panda is the mountains of the central China, because that is a place where they feed mainly on the bamboo shoots, which is their favorite food. Now there is another example of the habitat, that is of the leopard. Leopard is much less fussy about its habitat and its food. It can only live on open grass and tropical forest, and even on farmland quite close to towns and villages, clearly to praise. Habitat of a leopard is very large. Here is a picture of a leopard, and along with his habitat there is a grassy land. The two examples that we have studied, one is of the giant panda and one is of the leopard. These two examples are the examples of the habitat of the animals that have only one habitat throughout of their lives. They do not have more than one habitat, but there are some living species, or there are some examples of such species that have different habitats in the different phases of their lives. For example, um, a tadpole. For example, a tadpole. A tadpole is a species that has different habitat in the different phase of its life. For example, tadpole is an aquatic animal living and growing in the fish water, and when it has grown and converted to a frog, its habitat is moist places on the land. In this picture, we clearly can see that here is a tadpole, a small tadpole with legs. In this phase of his life, it lives in the fresh water, and after it becomes a frog, from the young frog to the adult frog, it no longer remains, its habitat is no longer the fresh water, but its habitat becomes the moisture places of the land. So this is an example of a species that has more than one habitat in the different phases of its life. Here is a picture of a freshwater pond habitat. There are two parts of the freshwater pond habitat. One is the below the surface of the water, and one is the above the surface of the water. There are a lot of organisms, living things, you can say. For example, if we talk about the part that is below, that is underwater, that is below the surface of the water, there are a lot of species. For example, there are tadpoles. For example, there are water bees, there are bloodworms, there are snails, there are fish, there are larvae, there are nymphs, there are froglet or a tadpole, for example, water scorpion. And if we talk about the upper surface of the water, or we can say that there are dragonflies, there are frogs, there are larvae of mosquitoes, there are mosquitoes itself, there are yellow water lilies. So this is basically a complete picture of a freshwater pond habitat where a different types of the species lives together, because they find their place to live, and also they find their food here. That is why this place is a habitat of the different species. Now, physical environment. The physical environment, students, physical environment is basically the non-living environment, the non-living part of the environment. There are some factors on which the physical environment depend upon. There are certain factors. For example, the list of the factors are climate, soil, light, temperature, water, acid and alkaline conditions, oxygen, and eighth and the last one is deserts and tropical forests. Climate is basically the weather. As we know that the weather is different in the different areas, and also it is different from place to place, time to time, day by day. Sometimes it is hot, sometimes it is windy, sometimes it is sunny, sometimes it is stormy, sometimes it is like rainy. So different species, different living things likes to live in the different climates. So climate also decides which type of species live in the certain area, or which type of species cannot live in a certain area. The second point is the soil. Soil also decides, because sometimes there is lot of moisture in the soil. For example, frog, as we have studied in the previous topic, that a tadpole, when the tadpole converts to an adult frog, it likes to live in the moisture places. But for the other example, but the other animals, sorry, but like the other animals like tiger or or a dog or a cat do not want to live in the moisture places, they want dry land. So soil is another factor that affects that which type of the species live in which type of the areas. Third factor is the light, because some species want to live in the dark areas and some species want to live in the light areas, and some species, for example plant, needs light for their photosynthesis, that we have decided earlier, that we have studied earlier, that the different type of the plants needs sunlight to produce their food in the process of the photosynthesis. So light is another important factor. Fourth factor is the temperature. As we know that as a human beings, it's as we are human beings cannot live in the too hot or a too cold temperature. Similarly, all other species needs a certain temperature to live. And different species have different certain temperatures. That is why different species live in the different. For example, a polar ice bear can live in the cold weather. They cannot live in the hot weather. That is why they found in the places where there is a cold temperature. For example, a tropical lizard, it is a type of the species that have a body temperature of 30 degree Celsius, and as the day starts, its body becomes active because of the high temperature. The lizard acts at a very great speed. It's catching its insects and prey, and eats food. As soon as the sun begins to go down in the sky, temperature falls and the lizard becomes less and less active. So temperature is a factor that decides the types of the species in the environment as well. Fifth factor is the water. As we know, all the living things need water if they are to stay alive. So water is much important. Sixth factor is acid and alkaline conditions. Acid or alkaline soil is also affects the distribution of plants and animals in the certain area. Oxygen. Oxygen is vital, students. Oxygen is vital for the respiration of all the living things. So all the living things need oxygen, and without oxygen there is no survival of life. Eighth, the last factor of the dependency of the physical environment is deserts and tropical forest. This is a point that we are going to discuss in detail. We are going to compare deserts and tropical rainforest, because first of all you must have an idea about deserts and rainforest. Then you can decide that how it affects the species in the certain areas. So deserts are basically the areas with the low rainfall, and tropical rainforests are the areas with the high rainfall. In the case of deserts, temperatures are very high during day and very cold at night. But in case of tropical rainforest, high temperatures all the times. In the case of deserts, plants are mainly short-lived. But because of the because of the low rainfalls, plants are mainly short-lived because they need water for their growth. In the case of tropical rainforest, a large number of plants of all the kinds, as well as shrubs and climbers and ferns and other plants are there, because there is a high rainfall. Enough amount of water is there for the growth of the plants. That is why large number of the plants, 10,000, around about 10,000 different kinds of trees are there in the tropical forest. Now in the case of deserts, there are few animals because there are low rainfalls, because there are severe conditions of the temperature. That is why there are few animals. But in the case of the tropical rainforest, at least 5 million different kinds of animals are there, because they can stay, because they find the suitable survival conditions. In the case of deserts, as there are low rainfalls, there are less amount of the water. That is why little humus in the soil. But in the case of tropical rainforest, there are high rainfalls. There is enough amount of the water. That is why a fairly thick layer of the humus in the soil. In case of deserts, the cold-blooded snakes and lizards are active during the day. So I like to explain this point, why they are active during the day, as we have studied in the previous topic, temperature. In that we have discussed that some types of the lizards and snakes are that are active at a certain temperature. and because in the deserts in the night the nights are too cold. We have studied in the this nights are too cold in the deserts. That is why some and species such as lizards are active during day, but as the sun goes down, or mm, they take shelters in burrows at the night to avoid the cold, and their activity becomes low. But in the tropical rainforest, as there are high temperatures all the time, so the animals may the snakes and lizards can be active all the time. So, from all these points, you must be clear now how deserts and tropical rainforests are different from each other and how they affect the different types of the species. Some species have their habitats deserts, and some species will have their habitats in the tropical rainforests. And all these factors that we have studied in the previous topic, as climate, soil, light, temperature, water, acidic alkaline conditions, oxygens, and deserts and rainforests decide which type of the species can live in the which type of the area, and which type of the species cannot live in the certain area, because the species cannot find their space to live and cannot find their food there. That is why they cannot live in the certain area. So our today discussion about the living things and environment stops here, because this is the first part of the living things and environment, and the remaining part of the chapter we will discuss in the second half of this chapter. So till that, goodbye students, Allah Hafiz, take care.